Hello, world. Welcome to Jonniebee 9458, new published author of the book titled God's Gift to You, Book One, advocating for mental health awareness, mental health wellness tied to education. The reason why I decided to start advocating for mental health awareness, mental health wellness tied to education is because this book is my first book. My second book is already written and I will be getting it published as soon as I come up with more money to get my second book published, because getting a book published is not cheap. Well, it wasn't for me. I went through a publishing company. For people who may be thinking about writing their own book, there are many ways you can go about getting a book published. One is to self publish, which may be more cost efficient, but you will be responsible for a lot of the work. I decided to go with traditional publishing, which costed more money because my publishing company handles a majority of the work. And I did not want to be responsible for all the work that is involved with getting the book published, marketing, promoting, advertising. Like there's so much behind the scenes of getting a book published. Like I said, this is book one. Book two is already written, and as soon as I can afford to get my second book published, I will. And there will also be a third book to follow that. It is a series of 3 books. And the reason why I decided to write a book is because, like my book says, God's gift to you, right? It's not about religion. It's about how, even though we go through some really horrific things in life, right? There are gifts that we get along the way. We all have gifts that a higher power gives us. You have people who produce movies, right? Unfortunately, I can't produce a movie because it is very expensive. I'm not an actor, I'm not an actress, and I am not in the entertainment world where I make movies. That's just not the gift God gave me. Then you have people who sing songs. Taylor Swift always sings about the relationships that didn't work out for her, right? And people love it. They love hearing stories, whether it's a movie or whether it's a song. People love hearing people's stories. It's just that there are many ways to tell a story. Unfortunately, I'm not an actor, I'm not an actress, I'm not a singer, right? I'm not an entertainer. However, my gifts is that I learned to read and write. And I learned how to tell stories through writing books. So that's what I do. I write books. The books I write about is about real life stuff. It's not fantasy, it's not fiction. Um, in my stories, I tell you the story of children being born into society by young adults who are undereducated, meaning they never finished high school, they never furthered their education beyond whatever grade level they dropped out at. Then you have a lot of people in the world who have mental health illnesses that a lot of people do not address those mental health diseases. They're not in touch with the fact that they may have a mental health illness. Then you have people on top of those two factors that I just mentioned who abuse drugs. They deal drugs, they use drugs, they abuse drugs. And with these three factors, these things can lead to people who are not only being harmful to themselves, but being harmful to everyone around them. Yes, including the children. So when I write, I talk about being born into a world where my mother was a single parent. She had 4 children by 3 different men. All adults involved were dealing drugs, using drugs, and abusing drugs. With that came adults being physically violent with each other. They fought over money, they fought over drugs. Um, when you start using and abusing drugs, depending on the type of drugs you are using and abusing, it can have some severe consequences to your body when the drugs run out. It can cause you to do things that most quote unquote normal people would not even consider doing. So, because my mother was undereducated, had a mental health disease that went undetected because of her drug usage, she had 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. And she surrounded herself with other people who were dealing drugs, using drugs, and abusing drugs. So when you grow up in a environment of young adults who were severely undereducated, possibly had mental health diseases that went undetected because society just seen a bunch of young people using and abusing drugs and tied their signs and symptoms and causes and effects to them being addicted to drugs, not realizing that it went deeper than that. So, because these young adults were harming themselves and harming everyone around them, they also was harming the children. When you are a child and you live in a community with young adults who live in poor neighborhoods, low socioeconomic communities is what they call them, surrounded by adults who may have had some mental health illnesses and were dealing drugs, using drugs, abusing drugs, they were very violent. They were very violent to themselves and they were very violent to the children. So you have a community of young children who are being severely physically, mentally, sexually, financially abused. And these children, they grow up with scars. They grow up with scars. They grow up with learned behavior because when children are small and they see how the adults interact with one another, they learn this behavior and they don't know any better because they're just babies. They think this is normal. They've never seen anything outside of their communities. This is all they know. So this is how they grow up. Um, I always talk about this one story about my younger brother sharing with me how when he was a little boy, my mother was dating a man who was running around in stolen cars and showing my little brother how to pop locks on cars and what tools were used to start these cars. Now, my brother does not have a history of riding around and stealing and stolen vehicles that I'm aware of. Like, that was not an issue for him. But this is just an example of what I mean about learned behavior. These young adults, like these young men who were dealing drugs, abusing drugs, right? They were teaching the young men in the community that this was life. And these men grew up learning this behavior. The physical abuse of it, right? Now, I'm sure that this happens to little boys as well, but I can definitely tell you for the little girls, right? These young adult men who were abusing drugs were sexually molesting these little girls, causing harm to them. Um, so when I talk about the scars, right? A lot of us are walking around with childhood trauma that we have to identify, acknowledge, and address. If you do not acknowledge the things that you experienced as a child, you tend to grow up into an adult with behaviors that are not healthy for you. So, this is what I talk about in my book, God's Gift to You, Book One. The building here is the building that I grew up in when I lived in Boston as a young girl. And every apartment in these buildings that you see, these adults, like they lived in this community, they socialized with one another. Um, there were people like dealing drugs out of some of the apartments. There were people who were like older men molesting young girls in these apartments. Like, this is where I grew up. This is the stuff that I talk about. This is what went on in my community. I grew up in Boston back in the 70s and 80s when Boston was still segregated. What that meant was Caucasian people did not come into our communities. African American, we did not go into the Caucasian people's communities. There was still a lot of racists in Boston back in the 70s and 80s. The only time a Caucasian person would come into our neighborhood was if they were police officers, social workers, truancy officers, and even then they brought a African American person with them. Another reason why a Caucasian person would even risk coming into the African community neighborhoods was to buy our drugs. And even then, they were taking a great risk because they could have got robbed, they could have got killed. In my book, I also talk about the children who lost their lives in these communities, children who never made it out of these communities. Some of them were my friends. Some of these people died in my home as a little girl by the hands of the parents. So when I tell you about scars, right? I share with you what it was like for me as a little girl the first time I seen an adult kill one of the children in my home. I was 6 years old. During that time, I lived in fear. Even as a young girl, when I didn't know anything about the world, I always knew that something was wrong. And I lived in fear. I was very afraid all the time. Um, Today, I am a woman in my mid 50s and I have a mental health illness. I have depression, I have anxiety, and I have panic attacks. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of my anxiety and panic attacks were instilled in me when I was a little girl and I lived in those communities and I lived in fear. I, as a little girl, got into fist fights with grown men twice my age, twice my size, and twice my strength, if not more. When I talk about having a mental health illness, what I am speaking of, right, is the brain, which is a soft tissue, lives underneath your skeletal bone. And the purpose of that skeletal bone is to protect that soft tissue, which is called your brain. The human body is not built to take blunt force trauma to the head. So, as a little girl, I'm talking 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, before my brain even fully developed, I ended up in physical fist fights with, like I said, grown men, twice my size, twice my age, triple my strength. And by getting into fist fights as a young girl with grown men, I took some impacts to my head, blunt force trauma, which caused long term medical effects. Another reason why a person can end up with a mental health illness is that we have what is called neurotransmitters in our brain. And neurotransmitters are your brain's chemicals. The brain is supposed to naturally produce chemicals to sustain itself. If these neurotransmitters end up being damaged, they tend to not function properly. For me, being that I have depression, so the chemicals that my brain are supposed to naturally produce, some of those chemicals are not working properly. That is why they have what is called mental health medications. So scientists and chemists, they mix together these chemicals in a lab and they put them into a little tiny pill for people with mental health illnesses to take, and it's basically the chemicals that my brain is supposed to naturally produce on its own. A lot of people tend to be more comfortable with talking about physical ailments such as high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. It seems like society is more acceptable when we talk about physical body ailments. You start talking about mental health diseases, and people get weird, they get awkward. They don't know what to say, they get quiet, they walk away. When you go to the doctors for whatever aches and pains and injuries you might have sustained over the years to your body, let's not forget the brain. It is a part of your body. Sometimes things can go wrong in your brain in which you need to seek medical attention for. If you get a toothache, you go to the dentist. If you get an ache or pain in your body, you go to the doctor. Mental illnesses are a little harder to detect because even though it is very common and there are millions of people walking around on this earth with a mental health illness, there are a lot of misinformation, fear, misinformation about mental health. Growing up in Black communities like mine, you mention psychiatrist to a person, and the first thing they say is, I'm not crazy. Well, who determines what crazy is and what crazy is not? I don't even believe that crazy is really a medical terminology. Everyone tends to act crazy. Now, mind you, I said act crazy, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily crazy. Diagnosis of mental health diseases include depression, you have manic depression, you have bipolar, you have one that is so common, social anxiety. You have, I don't know why, but the researchers and scientists categorized autism under mental health illnesses. However, from my experience of working in the field with young adults who have autism, Down syndrome, things of that nature, I believe it to be more of a developmental concern. But I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher. Um, but apparently, they are categorizing autism under mental health illnesses. You have schizophrenia. You have DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. You have anxiety. You have panic attacks. But I think anxiety and panic attacks are more under like the signs and symptoms of the mental health illness as opposed to being a mental health illness in itself. You have schizophrenia, DID, autism, I'm sorry, guys, depression, manic depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, DID, social anxiety, autism. I think that kind of sums it up. There could be more that I'm not aware of, but those are the usual diagnoses. Signs and symptoms. It depends on what your diagnosis is that you will start experiencing signs and symptoms of whatever mental health illness that you get diagnosed with. For me, with depression, they tie sadness to people who are depressed. While I can feel sadness a lot of days, right? Um, I also have days that I'm happy. I also have days where I feel joy. You know, there are a wide range of human emotions. It's not just sad. And I think and I know that most people, right? You're supposed to have a range of emotions even if you don't have a mental health illness, right? There, like I said, some days we're happy, some days we're joyful, some days we feel sorrow, some days we feel sad, some days we feel angry. Like there are so many emotions that every person normally has. But with people who are depressed, like I have days that I may feel really sad. And it's not the normal sadness. I'm going to talk to you about my depression, right? First of all, let's talk about the myths, okay? Because since I started talking about my mental health illness, right, people seem to tie mental health illnesses with stupidity. Not everybody in the world, first of all, what is stupidity? Like, who determines what stupid is and what stupid is not? I graduated from a 2-year college with an associate's degree in science. I graduated from Branford Hall Career Institute with a certificate for medical assistant. I have gone to business schools. I have gone to accounting schools. I have gone to school for medical billing and coding, in which I took the state board license and passed, meaning I am licensed as a medical billing and coding specialist. I have worked in doctor's offices most of my life, from the time I was probably 19 years old to my mid 40s. I've worked for Brigham and Women's Hospital. I worked for Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. I work for, let me slow my brain down. I work for Boston Children's Hospital. I worked for Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. I worked for Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. I've worked for countless primary care physicians' offices. I worked in countless specialty offices. I studied in school anatomy, physiology, biology. Um, I gotta slow my brain down. And I'm gonna tell you, that's another sign of my mental health illness. So we have what is called racing thoughts, okay? So on one side of the brain, right, it's all the good information that I've accumulated over the years, the good experiences, my education, all the happy stuff. On the other side of the brain is all the negative stuff that I've encountered in my life over the years, bad experiences. Sometimes people may refer to hearing voices, right? The voices is all the voices of people who have criticized us, talked down to us, shamed us, guilt us. Like, it's a whole lot of negative stuff. So what racing thoughts is, everything in your head is like going by so fast, right? And sometimes it's hard to get it. Like, I had to train my brain, like, to slow my brain down, where I'm able to grasp some of the information. Over the years, I've had to train myself to not plug into all the negative information, because it can get loud. It can get louder than the good information. And sometimes we tend to focus more on the negative stuff, just because when first started experiencing my signs and symptoms, I didn't know how to tune into the good information, because the bad stuff was so loud and it was so much. And I had harmful thoughts. And there was a period in my life that I was doing harmful things to myself. The reason for that is, when people tend to harm you, right? It is normal to get angry when people cause you harm, but because society likes to shame the victims and tell us how we should feel or how we should handle things, when people harm me and I would get angry, I would stuff those feelings because I didn't know what else to do with it. Sometimes when people harm me, I want to harm them back. I want to do some horrible things to them, right? But I know that I can't, because one, I might end up really hurting that person. Two, I could go to jail. So when people tend to really injure us and really hurt us, and we're hurting and we're injured, and we end up stuffing it, we stuff it. Another thing people tend to do, right, is over the years, I have learned to take the bad traumatic stuff, right? And put it in a little box and tuck that box away in the back of my mind. Like, you know how in our closet we have shoe boxes, and we tend to put shoe boxes like way in the back closet, and those are the shoes we don't wear anymore, so we don't touch that box, it just sits there, right? Well, people tend to do that with bad experiences throughout their life. We learn how to put that stuff in little boxes and stick it away in the backs of our minds. But whether we acknowledge that box or not, it is there, and you may still be acting out on that stuff. So sometimes we have behaviors, and the behaviors are coming from those things that are in the back of our minds that we don't deal with. So when people talk about hearing voices, right? I know for me, right? It is the voices of all the people throughout the years who have harmed me, who have, you know, sometimes, right, when people do things to you, right? As long as you don't talk about it, it might seem like it's okay. The minute you start talking to defend yourself, right? Then people get angry, they get bumped into feelings, and they want to fight. As if you didn't cause enough harm to me. Now you want to injure me because I am speaking up about it. So, like I said, the bad thoughts is just, the people that they say they hear voices. Now, some people may do be hearing, evil voices or whatever. I don't know about that. I'm laughing just because I'm weird. It's not funny. There are some people, for whatever reason, they say they hear voices. I think for me, the difference is, and this is why I say education is so important, okay? I didn't just go to school to learn about anatomy, physiology, biology. I go to school to learn everything I can. Like I said, I went to school for accounting, I went to business school. Like, I just like to learn, and I don't stop learning because education makes a major difference. Like I said, a lot of the adults from my neighborhood when I was a little kid never finished high school or furthered their education beyond whatever level they stopped at. Therefore, they probably were not employable. They probably could not get good jobs, um, which is probably why they lived in the poorer neighborhoods. Because if you don't educate yourself, and you don't set any goals as far as career wise, and you don't have knowledge about, the importance of money, building wealth, like education, right? It makes you more employable. It makes you able to get better paying jobs, and teaches you about financial things where you know how to make money to move out of the poor neighborhoods into the better neighborhoods. And the only reason why I stress that is because when you live in the poor neighborhoods, right, there are some things that you're going to experience. People who cannot, for whatever reason, not just get a job paying minimum wage. I'm talking about getting a job that pays above minimum wage, right? So when people can't get jobs that pay above minimum wage, they tend to have to do other things to make a living, like selling drugs. Um, in my neighborhood where I come from, right? It wasn't just selling drugs. They were selling other things too, like weapons. And I know that this is social media, and I don't want to give anybody any, ideas, right? I'm teaching about mental health awareness, okay? Causes and effects, signs and symptoms. And I'm gonna tell you, right? You see how I jump around, right? Like I said, there is so much information in there and it goes by so fast, right? So another cause from a mental health illness is you have a hard time focusing. You have a hard time like with memory because sometimes you forget things. Besides the fact that I'm a woman in my 50s, right? Like as the years go on, as we age, we tend to get forgetful. But I also know that when you have a mental health illness, besides, I think it's because of the racing thoughts that sometimes it's hard to focus because the information goes by so fast, it's hard to grasp it. Um, and yes, we do forget things sometimes. Um, so if you see me pause, it's just because I'm trying to catch up to my brain. Like I said, over the years, I had to learn how to slow my brain down. Um, I've had to learn to not focus on the negative information and tune more into the good information because there was a time that I was having harmful thoughts and there was a time that I was actually doing harmful things to myself. Because of all the bad stuff, you know, I felt a lot of shame. I was embarrassed. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt angry that people were hurting me and I couldn't do anything about it. So I stuffed the bad feelings. I stuffed it. And what happens is when people tend to injure me and I can't do anything to injure them back, and I stuff the anger and I stuff the negative stuff, I end up causing harm to myself. I end up hurting myself. Like I didn't know how to deal with all this anger and all this hurt. So I'm going to go back to what I was saying because now it just came back to me. Bear with me. So when people tie stupidity to a mental health illness, like I said, first of all, who determines what stupid is and what stupid isn't? Okay. Because I am a very educated person. I not only have the structured educational institution knowledge with degrees and certificates, but I also have street knowledge. I grew up in the Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester section. I'm a woman in my mid 50s, and you don't get to make it to your mid 50s without gaining knowledge and wisdom. So I don't know why people like to tend to tie somebody being quote unquote stupid with having a mental health illness. Crazy I am not. Stupid I am not. What I am is human. Because I'm going to tell you something about mental health illnesses, right? It does not discriminate. It doesn't care about your age. It doesn't care about your race. It doesn't care about your whether you have money or not have money. It doesn't matter. Like millions of people walk around this world with a mental health disease every day, whether they know it or not. And I'm going to tell you this, if you're not in touch with your mental health illnesses, right? Take a look around you. Look at your life. How you living? Another factor that causes mental health diseases besides taking blunt impact to your head. How about if you have a blood relative, such as a parent or a sibling who has a mental health disease? Chances are, right, there are other family members with a mental health illness. According to the research and the scientists, right, bipolar is the number one mental health diagnosis that the researchers and scientists say that can be passed down from family member to family member. I myself have never been diagnosed with bipolar as of yet. It's always been depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. And like I said, a lot of that anxiety and panic attack might have stemmed from being a little girl, living in a community where the adults were causing harm and killing the babies. I lived in fear. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. Like, I've learned to have humor about it. There was a period in my time where all I did was cry. Signs and symptoms. I was very depressed. I cried a lot. I slept a lot. I overate. I underate. It messes with your appetite. It messes with your sleeping habits. It messes with your dietary habits. It messes with your digestive system. And I'm going to tell you something else, right? Society has gotten so comfortable with shaming the victims. Throughout my life, I've heard, what part did you play in it? I didn't know I had to play a part. For a lot of years, I stayed quiet because a lot of my abusers were people that I loved and cared about. And I stayed silent to protect them because I still loved them. And as long as I stayed silent, everything was cool. I stayed silent for many years, even as an adult, because I didn't want to hurt people. And because I knew, right, that some of them people were going to get angry that I was calling them out and they would come after me. Again, living in fear. It's not fear like I'm afraid to fight somebody. I grew up in Boston in the Roxbury and Dorchester section. I grew up fighting grown men, but it's not about that. It's not about that because it's not about that I'm afraid to get into a physical altercation with someone. It's about I'm afraid that I may injure somebody and end up in jail. And I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. In my adult life, even with a mental health disease, I've never been in a mental health institution. I've never been arrested. I've never been to jail. But I can tell you this, right? I know a lot of people who have gone to jail, right? And I'm going to tell you this, it must be a traumatic experience because for some people, right, they went into jail one way and came back a whole different person. We don't know what goes on in jail. I'm sure it's a whole different lifestyle going on behind them walls in prison that we know nothing about, except for the people who actually been there. And I have seen it. I have seen them go in one way and come out a whole different person, probably traumatized. Who knows? The climate around society blaming the victims. So some people will say, Johnny, you got to get over it. Johnny, you got to let that stuff go. Johnny, you need to move on. Johnny, you don't need to be holding on to that stuff. I have healed from my childhood trauma. But I'm going to tell you, as a single woman in my mid 50s, right? I have dated throughout my life. I've never been married. It's not because I didn't get the proposals. It's just because the people who were proposing, I didn't think they were ready for marriage. Hell, I didn't think I was ready for marriage. And I realized as a middle-aged woman, single in the world dating, right? There are a lot of men out there with mental health issues. And for me, it's not about judging. It's about the fact that because I have a mental health illness, I can't be with people who have mental health illnesses that are going to trigger me. And then there are people who have mental health illnesses that they're not even in touch with. They're just running around causing harm and injuring people, and they don't identify, acknowledge, or address whatever they got going on. And when you deal with these people, sometimes you could come out of relationships traumatized. Some people have said to me, "Oh, a lot of women are still single because don't nobody want them." Shame on you. Shame on you for saying that. I have men hitting me up on social media every day. I'm a woman in my mid 50s, and not to toot my own horn, I'm fine as hell. I am fine as hell for a woman in my mid 50s, even with a mental health condition. I choose to stay single because I have not yet found a man who I believe would make a good partner. And it's not like I haven't dated, it's not like I haven't tried. Let me tell you something. Sometimes you can't go fishing in the same ponds that you swim in, because I am not the only person who survived those neighborhoods, grew up, and is now running around the world as an adult, right? You have men out here in their 50s and 60s still doing the same crap that they were doing back in them neighborhoods. And how about the women, right? Let's talk about the women. For whatever reason, right? You have women out here in long term relationships with men. They know these men cheating on them. They stay. They stay for whatever reason. Like, I get love, right? I get love, right? But how about loving yourself? Like, why would you want to be in a relationship with somebody who traumatizes you and abuse you? Just because they don't physically put their hands on you, just because they don't, I don't know, there's other forms of abuse, right? Lying, cheating, manipulating, that is abuse. There are men out here, right? Let me tell you ladies something, right? If he's sleeping with you unprotected, you best believe he's sleeping with her unprotected. So in a way, it is a form of abuse, because how about if he goes out there and sleeps with someone unprotected and then comes back and sleeps with you unprotected and gives you something you can't get rid of, such as an STD or HIV? How about that? So people get mad at me when I talk about these men running around here, sleeping around with women, having unprotected sex, right? And these women who know that these men are out here sleeping around on them, and they choose to stay. So recently, I shared an experience with you guys, right? And people got upset with me and was like, "Oh, some stuff don't belong on social media." Let me tell you something. You have performers up on social media like Cardi B, Beyonce. You have all these rappers and all these artists, right? And even regular everyday people, women up there shaking their booties, and they got that challenge going on, right? And everybody thinks it's okay for stuff like that to be up on social media, right? It's okay for people. I see people physically fist fighting on social media. And I guess like that is more acceptable than some young woman who's up on social media trying to educate the world. So that's why I put it up on social media. So, anyway, like I was saying, recently I posted some stuff up about my experience with dating this young man. So, as a single woman, right? I was out in the world. I have friends. We go to parties. We go to gatherings. So yeah, I'm out at a function one day and this young man approaches me. He starts talking to me and asks me for my number. I'm an intelligent woman. I know what goes on in the world. So, of course, I asked him all the right questions. First thing I asked him was, do you have somebody? Are you with somebody? And although I know people lie, you don't just walk around assuming that everybody's going to lie. Like we are adults, we're in our 40s and 50s. He told me he wasn't with anybody. We exchanged numbers. We became friends. We started hanging out together. We started dating. During that time, some other people came to inform me that this young man had been in a relationship with this other woman off and on for 18 years. So, as a woman, I go to him and I ask him. He said, yes, but we're not together anymore. And I don't want to be with her anymore. I want to be happy. I want to move on. He told me some things about the 18-year relationship that I knew it was not a healthy relationship. But who am I to say? All I know is this young man, when I told him about what the crowd told me about him, he answered my questions. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to trust him. He said he don't want to be with her no more, that he's tired and he just wanted to move on and be happy. I assumed it was with me. We were dating. We were together for 3 months. Tell me why after 3 months, right? This dude ghosted me. Ghosted me. He stopped calling me. He stopped returning my phone calls. I'm calling him. I'm leaving him messages. He doesn't pick up. He doesn't return my calls. Okay, fine. Of course, I am very concerned. I've been dating this man for 3 months. Like, where are you? What happened? What's going on? I had questions. Tell me why one night I pull up at a party, right? And all my friends are running out to the car and they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm just like weirded out, wondering why everybody's asking me, am I okay? Like, I'm fine. What do you mean, am I okay? What's going on? Tell me why I go in the party. He's there with another girl. He's there with another girl. His girl. So you mean to tell me after all that, you decide to go back to your girl that you've been off and on with for 18 years, that you told me you weren't with her no more, you don't want to be with her no more, you wanted to be happy, you wanted to move on. We dated for 3 months. You didn't come back and tell me, hey, I think I'm going to try to work it out with my girl. You ghosted me. And then I go to a party only to find out you're with your girl again. Okay, fine. I'm at this party, right? My heart is breaking into pieces. I am humiliated because all my friends was running up to my car asking me, was I okay? Before I even got out my car because they already knew that he was in the party with somebody else. When I walked in there, I had to put a smile on my face, pretend like everything was okay, while inside I was falling to pieces. I was humiliated, but I stayed, I danced, and when I couldn't take it anymore, I left. And I'm gonna tell you guys, right? When I left that party that night, I went home, I sat in my car. Yes, I had violent thoughts. There were some things that I wanted to go back and do to them, right? But another male friend who was at that party and knew what was going on, thank God he followed me home that night. And as he pulled up, I was sitting in my car, bawling my eyes out. And when he showed up, he was just like, let's just talk to me. And I was telling him, I'll be right back because I was ready to go do some damage. And he was like, no, don't go. Just stay with me. Just talk to me. So I decided to stay. Like that guy, he saved my life that day. I decided not to go back, right? So fine. Now, for the next several days, I am blowing up his phone because I need answers. I couldn't understand. Like, talk to me. What is going on? There were times he would pick up the phone and tell me that it's not what I think it is. I later on found out that she moved back into his home. He told me that was a lie. She wasn't living with him again. It's not what I think it is, blah, blah, blah. Yet he continued to stay with this woman, lied to me about being with her. I'm going to tell you, right, what it did to my mental health. What it did to me as a woman. This was the first time I ever experienced a person doing this to me. I was new to this, mind you. I was with someone for 18 years, so I didn't have a lot of experiences with being single and dating, and even when I did, I had never encountered anything like this prior to this. So yes, I was very confused, I was very hurt. I went into severe depression. I went into severe depression. It was bad. As time went on, I healed, I got better, I moved on. Do you know that relationship didn't work out again? It didn't work out again. And yes, I took him back. I took him back because I had already invested so much time. It wasn't just the time, like it was me. Like I was in love with this person. I was in love with him. Maybe I shouldn't have been, right? I shouldn't have been. I should have guarded my heart. But I didn't know that people at our age in our 40s did things like that. Who does that? But apparently a lot of people do. So anyway, for the next 10 years of my life, I danced around this man as he would be with me for a while, then go back and be out with some other girl. Not the girl he was with, it'd be a new girl. He would end up back in my life. We would end up back together. And then he'd pop up with another girl. And this continued for 10 years. 10 years. He'd lie. He'd manipulate. He would never admit to me what was going on. Some men, right? They don't want to let you go, right? They want you to stay there and be their girl, right? And be faithful and be good to them, right? But they still want to be out there playing around, right? These are grown men in their 40s and 50s. So anyway, there was a period of time we were together and it was going well. I knew his friends, he knew my friends, all our friends. We all hung out together in the same parties, in the same anywhere concerts, wherever we would go. We all knew each other, right? So then we decided that I was going to move in with him and we were going to try to live in together to see if we can make it work, right? We talked about it. We planned it. I had my brother help me move my things into his house. Do you guys know He had another girl already living there in his house with him that I knew nothing about until I showed up at his door with all my stuff. He had another girl living there. Here I am, late at night, at his house with all my things packed up, ready to move in, with my brother helping me, and there's another woman living in his house. He tells me it was just a friend. She didn't have anywhere to go. He didn't want to be with her. He was just helping her out. She had two boys living in his home with him and her. And of course, he lied because when I talked to the woman, she told me that he wanted to be with her. She slept in his bed once, but then decided she didn't want to be with him because she was much younger than him. And she continued to live in his house. So now here I am with everything I own in this man's house. He told me that he had asked the lady to move out, but the lady refused to move out. So I had a talk with the lady and I told her, him and I been off and on going out together for more than 10 years. I am here now and him and I want to try to live together and see if we can make it work. And she had to go. She left. Tell me why within 3 months of me living there, I started growing suspicious of him because he started moving funny. And you women know, right? We know our men. We know when they switch up on us. We know when they start moving funny. So when I tried to ask him, like, what's going on? Like, talk to me. What's going on? He kept telling me, not now. He needed space. I did everything I could to try to communicate with this man, right? He totally shut down on me. I knew he was seeing someone else. So after 3 months, I decided, like, if you want to pursue somebody else, wait till I move out. Like, give me a chance to get up out of here. So I moved out. But just because I moved out didn't mean I didn't still love him, didn't mean I didn't still care about him. Mind you, I spent 10 years of my life with this man. Anyway, when I moved out, I call him the next day. He doesn't answer the phone. For the next several days, I'm calling him. He doesn't answer the phone. I'm leaving him messages. He doesn't return my calls. Tell me why. Some girl posted up a picture of him and her on Facebook talking about her relationship with him, right? And I look at the date and I'm like, well, wait a minute. The date that they took the picture, I was still living in his house. So I asked him about it because mind you, yes, he'll go through periods of time where he don't answer the phone for me because he don't want to face me. He doesn't want to be accountable for his actions. So he will not answer the phone for me until he thinks I got over it and I'm not mad anymore. And then he'll answer the phone for me, right? So, yeah, we were still friends. We were still talking on the phone. There were times we were still being intimate. But when I asked him about the pictures on Facebook and the date line of the girl posting the pictures and how the dates of the pictures on Facebook were dates when I was still living with him, he denied that he knew the girl when I was living with him. He denied he was in a relationship with the girl when I was with him. In fact, he told me he met the girl after I moved out. Well, wait a minute. The dates that she posted the pictures on Facebook were dates when I was still living with you. So how did you meet her after I moved out? And who in the world jumps into a new relationship after 10 years of being with someone else? Like you even give us time to figure out what we were gonna do, how we were gonna work it out. Like you just automatically started sleeping with somebody else. But yet now you have regrets that I moved out of your house. You still don't admit to me that you were seeing this woman while I was living with you. You're still being intimate with me, right? So, because I knew he would not tell me the truth and I needed to know, I reached out to the woman because I needed to know. And I needed her to know who I was. I needed her to know that while you was messing with this person, he was in another whole relationship and had a woman living with him. You know what she did? She got mad. She told me it's not that I just wanted her to know. She felt like I did it because I wanted him back. Little did you know, we were still being together. We were still being intimate with each other. Whether I had him or not, he was still in my life. So anyway, when she went back and told him that I reached out to her, he was so afraid he was going to lose her that he told her about my mental health illness and told her I was crazy. So this lady then takes the information that he told her about my mental health illness, right? And used my mental health illness as a weapon to injure me some more as if you wasn't already hurting me enough. And what made it worse, right? This was a nurse, right? So you went to school to become a nurse because you had a desire to care for people and help people in the medical profession, right? Like you're a nurse. You went to school to learn about human anatomy, physiology, biology, um, the physical body, the illnesses that can occur with the body. You became a nurse because you wanted to help people, but yet you go to work every day and put this smile on your face and you're this loving and caring person at work and you're caring to for patients, but in your personal life you are running around sleeping with somebody else's man, and when that woman confronts you about it, you then use your knowledge about her mental health illness and use it as a weapon to hurt her even more. And to make it worse, right, this nurse, right, this goody two-shoe nurse, right, she also posts up on Facebook about her religion, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. She's throwing up quotes from the Holy Bible, right? And this is the problem I have with religion. It is it is like the Holy Bible is so contradicting in itself, right? But then when you have people who claim to believe in the Holy Bible and who post up scriptures on their Facebook, God bless you, pray for me, blah, blah, blah. But then you live your life. And I know we're not perfect and we all fall short, but you and I are both in our 50s. I'm gonna tell you one thing, right? When I was a kid, right, we fought with this. But as an adult, I learned to fight with this, my knowledge, my wisdom. So, anyway, this young gentleman, we continued to be intimate together. He's still with her. He's been with her for 4 years. She tells me she doesn't want to marry him. He tells me He doesn't want to marry her. So you mean to tell me you took my man from me, right? You've been with him for 4 years now, right? You're running around town with him. You think you got something good, right? You think this is the one. Everybody knows he still cheats on you. I can attest to that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not intimate with him anymore, but him and I are still friends. We still talk. And it's not like he doesn't ask me. And when I told her he was still being intimate with me, when I was still being intimate with me, when I was still being intimate with him, she told me that it was his place to ask because he was a man, and it was my place to say no because I was a woman. Excuse me, when he was with me and when I was living with him, and he asked you, did you say no? Right back at you. It was his place to ask that because he's a man, and it was your place to say no because you was a woman. You didn't give a damn about him being with me. You didn't give a damn about the fact that I was living with him. You told me yourself that you remember when you were intimate with him, when you were in his house, you were in his bed, and my bathrobe was still hanging on the back of his door. Miss Delphine Allen, the nurse from Boston. You nurse, you holy, sanctified Christian woman. So, yes, I posted up the text messages, the interactions between us. And it ain't even about you, Miss Delphine Allen, the nurse from Boston. It ain't even about him. And it's not even about me. It's about me spreading awareness. It's about me advocating for mental health awareness, mental health wellness tied to education. Because let me tell you something about you guys' religion, right? Jesus was a teacher. He ran around teaching in love about love. And society decided to crucify him. And while the people that crucified him, right? All those people that stood in the audience and watched it happen. And because these people were so afraid for their own lives, not one of them intervened. They sat there and watched these people hang this man up on a cross. How do I relate that to all of what I'm telling you guys? Is that society seems to have conformed to this type of behavior because this young man, right, he has friends. He surrounds himself with certain people that protect him. They protect him. They will smile in his girl's face even though they know what he does. And they'll be your friend and they'll smile in your face every time you come around. And of course, people will be like, well, oh, that's none of my business. I'm going to tell you something. I have the type of friends that if I am causing harm to myself or causing harm to other people, they're going to tell me about it. They're going to tell me where I fall short. They're going to tell me where I'm being wrong. Because his friends are so busy trying to be his friend, they sit there and smile while he continues to do what he do, even to you. Miss Nurse, holy sanctified woman, you thought you were doing something when you was taking somebody else's man. Well, now you got him. 4 years into the relationship. You're still not married. He still runs around and cheats on you. He still lies. He still manipulates. The thing is about people like that, right? They don't change. They just change their victims. Ha! He's your problem now. But you don't leave because you love him and you talked about my mental health. Who's the crazy one? Who's the crazy one? You sat there and used your knowledge about my mental health illness to injure me more when I confronted you about sleeping with this person while he was in a relationship and living with somebody else. You got mad. You didn't want to know the truth, and you still don't want to know the truth. And while it is everybody's choice of whether or not they want to marry, because I get it, we're people in our 50s, right? We have grown children. Some of us have already been in long-term relationships. Some of us has already been married, and we're in our 50s now, right? We are free to make whatever decisions that we want to make, but it does not make it okay to be running around hurting people, especially when you're a freaking nurse. And you're teaching about God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Some people say they believe in God, but they don't really know. They don't really know. Hmm. I guess you both now. It's not like he ain't been mad at me before. Read your text messages. They're up on social media. I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I was angry. I was hurt, but I've gotten over it and I moved past it. But God gave me a voice to speak up, because the thing about people who victimize other people, they expect you to stay quiet about it. They don't want you to talk about how they injured you. And they don't went on with their life. They're happy. They got it going on. They didn't care how they injured you. And then for society who likes to protect people like that and shame and humiliate the victims by telling us what role did we play in it. The people who, because it is more important to sustain a friendship with this person, you stay silent. It's not your business, right? But then when stuff happen, right, you quick to jump in and want to physically fist fight to protect him, to protect him. Just like those people that stood in the crowd and watched those people hang Jesus on the cross and stood there and did nothing to stop it. This is why I talk about people's actions and their behaviors. For some people, right, they'll even use scriptures from the Bible to rationalize and justify their behaviors, which is why there are so many people who don't believe in that type of religion. These, we talk about Black pride, right? We talk about our people. We get mad when the police are like killing our people. But look what we do to each other. Then we wonder why other races look at us the way they look at us. We are causing harm to each other in our own communities. And yes, at one point, right, I told you because of my mental health illness, right? I had harmful thoughts. I was doing harmful things to myself. I'm in recovery. I have 18 years clean. I haven't had a smoke a pot, a drink of alcohol, nothing in 18 years, right? And for some of y'all still running around smoking pot and drinking alcohol. Well, guess what? In case no one told you, smoking pot and drinking alcohol is a drug. Just because it's legal, don't let these people confuse y'all. Anytime you take an outside substance or outside chemicals such as marijuana or alcohol and you put it into your body, you are messing with those neurotransmitters, the chemicals in your brain that your brain is supposed to naturally produce. You could end up with a mental health illness. But you're a nurse. You should know that already, huh? Yeah. And as far as the young men, right? And his friends, right? There's a program called Narcotics Anonymous where people are supposed to go, right? If you have the disease of addiction, right? They have this program called Narcotics Anonymous where you go, right? And you're supposed to build relationships with people, right? You're supposed to like get to know the people in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, right? You're building relationships with both men and women, right? But I'm gonna tell you this. For some of us, we quit going to that program because the people and the insanity that takes place in that program. How about that? They say we all belong, right? They say we all belong. I'm not saying the program doesn't work. I have 18 years clean. But I'm going to tell you this as far as the people in that program, right? We have tools, the basic textbook, the green and gold. Okay, let me slow my brain down. The basic textbook, the green and gold book, step work, get sponsor, do step work, they say. Sometimes even the women are just as harmful as the men. How about that? And again, while I know we all fall short, right? You have people in the program of Narcotics Anonymous, they call them book thumpers, right? They know they know the they know what do you call it? The step work, right? They know the books, they know the literature, right? They will beat you upside your head with that literature, right? And justify and rationalize the most outrageous behavior. And then they sit there and cry when somebody relapses or dies. Because they love NA. They owe so much to NA. But then you have men in their 40s and 50s running around just using and abusing women, right? Some of them got like 20, 30 years clean and they still are doing the same stuff that they were doing when they were out there using. NA, they call them dry drunks, right? Hmm. So as far as my mental health, when people say that I'm somewhere isolating, I'm not isolating. I just make better choices today. Who I tend to surround myself with, where I choose to go. There are other programs that I can go to. It doesn't have to be NA. Because if I continue to go to NA, I'm going to continue to run into this young man who also brings his girl around the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And he tells me, oh, she's not an addict. Okay. He tells me, "Oh, I don't bring her to the program." All my friends tell me every time you show up with her. And they don't understand why I let you run me out of the program. And I have to explain to them, it's not that you ran me out of the program. I choose not to be around you. I choose not to be around her. And he even told me that if me and her ever bumped heads and got into a fight, he would walk away. That's what he told me. He would walk away. So when I talk about mental health illnesses, right? And I talk about mental health awareness, mental health wellness, tied to education, right? As far as mental health awareness, I am aware of the people that are walking around with mental health illnesses just causing harm to people. I am aware of that. When I talk about mental health wellness, is that I make better choices now. I find other programs that I can go to get the help that I need, where I don't have to go in them programs around people who are still causing harm to people. Tied to education, I talk about it. I talk about it because I want the world to know that there are millions of people walking around here every day with a mental health illness, whether they're in touch with it or not, causing harm to people. The insanity. And mental health diseases, they don't discriminate. It doesn't care that you're a nurse. It doesn't care about your religion. And how society conforms to it, right? Because he tells me, oh, everybody does it. What do you think? You're going to change the world? Everybody does it. So what you mean to tell me is if 10 people jump off the building, that mean you gonna jump too? Everybody does it. He doesn't understand because I've had to tell him, like, you know how when women sleep around with men and they tend to call us hoes, right? Men can be hoes too. How about that? They have male hoes running around. And again, this isn't about attacking you. It's about trying to not just educate you because you're not the only one out there running around causing harm. You're right. Lots of people do it. He tries to convince me that everybody does it. Everybody like cool because I don't do it. Some of us, right? We get in these relationships, right? And when things don't go right in a relationship, right? Instead of handling it like adults, right? And trying to have conversations with each other and trying to figure out what's going wrong and trying to understand one another. You know, when you love and you care about somebody, just because you have a dispute with them doesn't mean what? Like if you get into a dispute with your kid, are you gonna just like not talk to your kid anymore? If you get into a dispute with your parents, do you just cut your parents out of your life? For men who are in relationships with women, right? When you get into a dispute with them, how about you sit still long enough to figure out if you guys are actually going to work through your problems and stay together before you jump into something else and drag a third person into the mix. And now you're causing harm to this unsuspected woman who's really out there trying to be a loving and caring person. Half of us are scared to date now. I go to clubs all the time. Men ask me for my number all the time. But because of my experiences, I'm like, I'm good. Yes, I have trust issues. This is just one of other stories that I have about growing up a single woman dating in the world with men in their 40s and 50s and 60s, still doing the same crap they were doing back in them neighborhoods. And the friends who they surround themselves with, who protect them, who hold their secrets, and the women who are out here messing with a man who's already in a relationship. You knew he was in a relationship. You knew he had a girl living with him, but it didn't stop you from going up in his house. And then you're going to get mad when I confronted you? Miss Delphine, the nurse in Boston? I know I keep saying it ain't about you guys, but this is a part of my story. You want to know about mental health awareness, right? Signs and symptoms, causes and effects, how it affects us in our daily lives. This is how. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep talking about it all over social media. I'm going to continue to write my books talking about mental health diseases, the disease of addiction, causes and effects, signs and symptoms, in the hopes that people will start to listen and stop running around here injuring everybody around you and go and get some help. Stop it. Stop using religion, mental health illnesses. Stop making excuses. Stop normalizing hurting people, injuring people. We all need to stop. We all need to stop. And for the people who say that single women are single because don't nobody want them, again, how society conforms to the most outrageous. Anyway, guys, hour and a half, not going to keep you anymore. Please stay tuned. Monday through Friday, I am here every day, hour and a half, advocating for mental health awareness, mental health wellness, tied to education. Have a good night. Be well.